Paris, the 23rd of August, 1572. The city slept uneasily under a humid summer sky. Bells from the church of Saint-Germain-l'Auxerrois stood silent for now, but their silence felt like the breath drawn before a scream. In a narrow workshop on Rue Saint-Jacques, a Huguenot printer named Etienne de la Rivière worked by candlelight. His fingers, stained with ink, traced the outline of a half-finished sentence. Asterisk, le brute à la porte. Asterisk, the sound at the door. Outside, soldiers of the royal guard began to gather. They whispered orders from men who carried no banners, only lists of names. Each name was a death warrant. From the Louvre to the River Seine, doors were marked with chalk crosses, the quiet signatures of doom. The air itself felt thick with conspiracy. Hours earlier, the Admiral Gaspard de Coligny, leader of the Protestant Huguenots and trusted advisor to King Charles IX, had been shot in an assassination attempt. He survived, barely, but his survival terrified those who had ordered it. Catherine de Medici, the Queen Mother, now feared that her failure would ignite the wrath of Coligny's followers, gathered in Paris for the royal wedding of her daughter Marguerite to the Protestant prince, Henry of Navarre. As the night deepened, a decision was made behind the palace doors. It would be quick, silent, and absolute. No witnesses, no survivors. The Queen's Italian advisors called it asterisk, machina, the machine, asterisk. At the stroke of midnight, a single bell broke the sky. From Saint-Germain-l'Auxerrois came the call that unleashed a storm of knives and muskets. Etienne looked up from his desk as the sound reached him one deep, hollow toll. Then came another and another. The door shook. He dropped his quill. By dawn, the Seine was red. The massacre that followed would tear apart France, shatter the illusion of divine monarchy, and stain the house of Valois forever. But was it chaos or calculation? Because what Paris witnessed that night was not the madness of a mob. It was the execution of a plan cold, structured, and written in advance. And behind it stood a woman whose silence could command the death of thousands. Catherine de Medici had just built the perfect machine. Before the massacre, the house of Valois appeared to stand at the height of splendor. The Louvre shone like a citadel of culture, where art, diplomacy, and religion seemed to coexist in fragile harmony. Catherine de Medici, the Florentine-born Queen Mother, had transformed the French court into a theater of grandeur. She sponsored artists, built palaces, and spoke often of peace. Her image was that of a mother protecting a fractured kingdom. But beneath the marble floors of her chateau, the kingdom trembled. Since 1562, France had been bleeding from within a civil war between Catholics and Protestants, known as the Huguenots. 8 separate wars had already been fought, each one ending not in peace but in exhaustion. Cities burned, noble families slaughtered one another in the name of God, and the Valois dynasty struggled to hold the country together. When King Charles IX ascended the throne, he was barely 10 years old. His mother ruled in his stead, a woman whose mind was sharper than any sword in her court. She knew that France could not survive another war, so she tried to weave peace through marriage. In the summer of 1572, she orchestrated the union between her daughter Marguerite de Valois and the Protestant prince Henry of Navarre a man destined one day to become Henry IV of France. The marriage was meant to heal centuries of division. Paris was decorated with banners, flowers, and music. Thousands of Huguenots poured into the Catholic capital for the celebration. For the first time, it seemed the blood-soaked soil of France might yield something other than death. Yet, peace, in Catherine's world, was never a gift, it was a calculation. She saw enemies everywhere: Spanish agents, Protestant rebels, and fanatics within her own court. Her son Charles IX was erratic and impulsive. Torn between his mother's counsel and the charisma of Admiral Gaspard de Coligny, the Huguenot leader who had become his closest advisor. Coligny urged the king to wage war against Spain, a plan that threatened to destroy France's fragile stability and the Queen Mother's careful alliances. In her letters to Italian relatives, Catherine wrote cryptic phrases about preventing a greater evil, saving the throne. Historians would later debate their meaning, but her actions soon gave them shape. The failed attempt to assassinate Coligny on August 22, just days after the royal wedding, lit the fuse. Paris exploded with rumors that the Queen herself had ordered it. Catherine's court began to fracture. The Guise family, champions of the Catholic hardliners, demanded vengeance. The king, terrified of civil war erupting inside his own capital, turned pale and silent. In that silence, Catherine spoke. She reminded her son that mercy was weakness, that if one enemy survived, they would all die. The plan she proposed was presented as a defensive act, the elimination of a few dangerous men. But what she set in motion would become one of the most systematic acts of extermination in European history. By the time the royal guards received their orders, Paris had already been divided into invisible sectors. Each commander held a list names of noblemen, scholars, ministers, printers, those who harbored heresy, those whose faith threatened the crown. When the bell of Saint-Germain would ring, it would not just summon soldiers. It would summon history's most ruthless machinery, the moment when faith became an excuse for murder and power hid itself behind the mask of divine will. And yet, even as the shadow gathered, the streets of Paris still glittered under torchlight. The Valois court dined, toasted the peace, and watched the fireworks over the Seine. A few hours later, those same lights would flicker against the blood-stained windows of the Louvre. Behind the veil of glory, the knives were already waiting. The massacre of St. Bartholomew's Day was not born from chaos. It was engineered. Every element, the timing, the signal, the targets, was calculated with bureaucratic precision. Behind the frenzy of swords and screams lay an architecture of control, a machine built from fear, faith, and the machinery of the crown itself. In the hours before midnight, orders moved silently through the corridors of the Louvre. Guards from the royal companies were summoned, joined by men loyal to the powerful Duke of Guise, sworn enemy of the Huguenots. Each officer received his sector, each captain his names. The list had been compiled days earlier by spies, priests, and informants who knew which doors to mark. Some doors bore chalk crosses, others wax seals. Every mark meant death. At the center of the operation stood the Queen Mother, Catherine de Medici, She did not give commands in the open. She whispered them into trusted ears, men who owed their lives and fortunes to her. To them, she described the killings as a necessary purge, a way to prevent an uprising from the Protestant nobles still lodged in Paris after the royal wedding. Her words were deliberate, detached, almost clinical. To Catherine, this was not vengeance. It was surgery. The first target was Admiral Gaspard de Coligny, He was murdered in his bed, his body mutilated and thrown from the window of his lodging at the Rue des Béthesy. The Duke of Guise, standing below, looked upon the corpse and said coldly, Let him be finished so that it may be done. It was the signal for the slaughter to begin. Moments later, the bell of Saint-Germain-l'Auxerrois, tolled across the city a sound that would become the most infamous in French history. At its echo, soldiers, guards, and mobs surged through the streets. Torches flared, windows shattered, and the first screams pierced the night. The night of knives had begun. But what appeared as spontaneous bloodlust was in truth the execution of prearranged design. Jacques Auguste de Thou. A later historian and witness wrote that the massacre advanced as a military campaign. Streets were closed off systematically. Gates were sealed to prevent escape. Bodies were dragged to specific collection points, dumped into carts, and taken to the river. The Seine became a conveyor of death, carrying its burden downstream toward Rouen. Documents found in later archives, letters between royal officers and the Parisian clergy, revealed an astonishing level of coordination. Commanders had orders to protect certain homes belonging to loyal Catholics, to search specific districts known for Protestant gatherings, and to maintain the pretense that the killings were spontaneous acts of public fury. Even the court chroniclers were instructed on how to frame the story. Divine justice, not royal decree. At dawn, King Charles IX appeared on the palace balcony. The city below him burned and bled. Smoke drifted over the rooftops of the left bank. He turned to his mother and muttered the words recorded by his sister Marguerite. Did I do this, or was it done for me? Catherine said nothing. She did not need to. The machinery she had set in motion no longer required her hand. Across Paris, the killing spread with ruthless logic. The soldiers who had begun as executioners became looters. The mobs that had been incited by priests turned against neighbors. Those who tried to flee were dragged from hiding. The corpses piled along the quays, and by morning, the waters of the Seine ran thick with the dead. The Times, Machine Times, had done its work. By sunrise, thousands lay silent, but the silence was deceptive. It was not the end, it was the beginning of something larger. Because once a nation learns how to organize death, it rarely forgets. And in the days that followed, France would discover how efficient its cruelty could become. When the sun rose over Paris on the 24th of August, 1572, it illuminated a city unrecognizable. Smoke drifted above the rooftops, and the streets gleamed red in the morning light. The air reeked of blood and river rot. The bells that had once announced weddings and royal births now tolled for the dead. Paris, the heart of Christendom, had become a slaughterhouse. Eyewitnesses spoke of bodies stacked like firewood at street corners, of children trampled in doorways, of priests blessing men with swords still dripping from their work. From the Louvre to the left bank, every district bore the mark of death. By evening, between **** 3,000 and 5,000 people, *** lay dead within the city walls. The Seine, once a mirror of royal pageantry, was choked with corpses drifting toward the countryside. Fishermen later testified that the river ran red for 3 days. And the violence did not end there. Messengers carried the news and the permission into the provinces. Rouen, Lyon, Orléans, Bordeaux, Toulouse, and countless smaller towns followed the example of Paris. Each region held its own St. Bartholomew's, as if the kingdom itself had decided to cleanse its conscience with blood. The massacres continued for weeks, sometimes months, claiming as many as ** 10,000 to 20,000 lives ** across France. The coordination was chilling. Letters between provincial governors showed that the killings were not spontaneous riots but organized purges. Orders from the crown were phrased ambiguously: maintain peace and remove threats to the crown. But the meaning was clear. Priests denounced heretics from pulpits, soldiers carried out raids under the guise of restoring order, and mayors drew up death lists to prove their loyalty. The Church of Saint-Germain-l'Auxerrois, whose bells had ignited the first slaughter, became the symbol of divine sanction. In Venice, Spanish ambassadors wrote to King Philip II describing it as God's judgment upon the enemies of faith. But even among Catholics, unease began to grow. Reports from the Venetian envoy Lorenzo Contarini described the stench of corpses, the horror of dogs feeding on the dead, and the universal dread that spread through Paris. Modern archaeology has confirmed these records. Excavations near the Ile de la Cité and Saint-Germain have uncovered skeletal remains, fractured skulls, slashed vertebrae, and musket balls embedded in bone. These findings align with 16th century Paris records, revealing the neighborhoods where killings were most concentrated: the printing quarter of Saint-Jacques, the merchant streets of Saint-Honoré, and the river quays where bodies were dumped. Each discovery tells a precise story of annihilation. The GIS mapping of these burial sites reveals a deliberate pattern rings of violence radiating outward from the Louvre, as if the royal heart had pumped death into every vein of the city. And yet, amid the ruin, the machinery continued to function. Soldiers collected valuables from the dead. Tax collectors recorded confiscated properties. Scribes noted vacant dwellings ready to be reassigned. Murder had become administrative. Catherine de Medici's intention, at least as she later claimed, had been to strike quickly and restore peace. But the peace that followed was a silence of graves. France's Protestant leadership was annihilated, its thinkers and printers exterminated, its cities poisoned by suspicion. For weeks after the massacre, fires burned on the Seine to cleanse the water. The smell of charred flesh mingled with the incense of requiem masses. Those who survived buried their dead in secret, carving no names. Even nature seemed to recoil. Chroniclers wrote of storms that swept across the countryside, of birds abandoning their nests along the riverbanks, of strange mists that hung over Paris long after the bodies were gone. Whether these were real or imagined, no one could tell. But the people of France understood one thing: something had been unleashed that could not be contained again. The massacre had begun as a calculated operation. It ended as a contagion. From that August morning onward, the soul of France would never again be whole. In the midst of the carnage, fragments of humanity endured small, trembling testaments to what it meant to survive the machinery of death. Among them was Etienne de la Rivière, the printer whose half-finished manuscript would one day resurface in the archives of the Bibliothèque Nationale. His fate was never recorded, but his words Le Brut à la Porte remained frozen in time, the final heartbeat of a man who heard death arriving one knock at a time. Other stories emerged through whispers and letters smuggled across borders. One Catholic nun, Sister Marguerite of the convent Saint Clotilde, wrote of sheltering 2 heretic children beneath the altar floor. She confessed her act only once, before her death, fearing both church and crown. In another account, a Protestant mother disguised herself as a laundress and floated down the Seine among the corpses to escape the city. Her child later testified in Geneva, "The river carried my salvation and my father's body together." These stories, scattered like ashes, formed the human residue of a catastrophe. They were almost lost to time until modern historians began to search for their traces, not in chronicles, but in science, Forensic teams from the University of Paris and the CNRS began mapping the geography of the massacre through GIS analysis, using digitized parish death registers, tax records, and letters. What emerged was not the chaos of mob violence, but the cold geometry of extermination. Each cluster of deaths mirrored the pre-assigned districts of the Royal Guard. Each parish corresponded to one commander's list. The massacre had been choreographed. In 2010, workers renovating the Quai de la Mégisserie discovered human remains sealed beneath an old wine cellar. The bones bore sword cuts to the back of the skull and musket wounds to the ribs, evidence of close-range execution. Nearby lay fragments of printing type and melted lead, an unmistakable link to the world of the Protestant press, silenced in one night. DNA tests compared these remains with documented Huguenot family lines preserved in Swiss archives. The results confirmed shared ancestry with refugees who had fled to Geneva after 1572. After 4 centuries, the dead were finally given a name. It was not just the bones that spoke. The *** letters of Venetian and Spanish diplomats, ***, once tools of propaganda, now served as legal testimony of complicity. Their meticulous dispatches describe the killings in real time. The Seine is full of corpses. The king's men cleanse the streets like butchers in a market. In their attempt to justify divine retribution, they left an unintentional record of state-organized murder. Even the weapons tell the story. Metallurgical analysis of recovered ***, rapiers, and musket balls. *** revealed identical alloy compositions, proof they came from the royal armories. The massacre had been waged not by an angry crowd, but by the instruments of monarchy itself. And yet, in the middle of this darkness, the memory of the victims refused to die. Surviving Huguenots fled to England, Switzerland, and the Netherlands, carrying with them the trauma and the warning. They printed pamphlets, drew woodcuts, and wrote hymns of grief that spread across Europe. These texts transformed the massacre from a local tragedy into a continental conscience. 4 centuries later, the evidence converges science, faith, and testimony, uniting into one voice that whispers through time. This was no accident, The Night of Knives was designed, refined, and executed with mechanical precision. Every bone unearthed, every document decoded, every mark of ink or lead is a fragment of the truth the crown tried to bury. The machine that Catherine de Medici built was not only for killing, it was for erasing memory. But memory, like ink pressed into paper, bleeds through centuries. It resists silence. And in that resistance, the dead continued to speak. When the smoke of Paris finally cleared, what remained was not victory, but an open wound that refused to heal. The massacre of St. Bartholomew's Day reshaped France's destiny, and with it, Europe's. The Valois dynasty never recovered from the moral ruin it had authored. Its power drained away, one whisper, one ghost at a time, until the crown itself collapsed beneath the weight of its sins. King Charles IX, tormented by visions of blood, descended into madness. Witnesses described him pacing the halls of the Louvre at night, muttering ***. How many did we kill, mother? How many? He died 2 years later at the age of 23, coughing up blood that he claimed was the color of the Seine. His successor, Henry III, inherited not a kingdom but a haunted empire fractured by fear, rebellion, and faith turned to fanaticism. As for Catherine de Medici, she lived long enough to see her power erode. The woman who had once orchestrated the fates of kings found herself besieged by the ghosts of her own creation. In her letters, her tone shifted from command to confession. "I desired peace," she wrote, "but found it only in the silence of the grave." She died in 1589, the same year her dynasty fell, leaving behind not an empire of stone, but of shadows. And yet, her machine endured. The logic of control through terror refined in Paris that August night would echo through the centuries. Every empire that followed learned the same lesson, that fear, when mechanized, can govern more efficiently than faith. The legacy of the massacre reached far beyond France. In England, Protestant preachers used it as proof of Rome's corruption. In the Netherlands, it fueled rebellion against Spanish rule. In Geneva, it hardened Calvin's disciples into a new militancy. Europe itself split more deeply along the fault lines that St. Bartholomew had carved. The age of faith was dying, replaced by an age of suspicion. Modern historians and scientists, through data and excavation, have reconstructed the night with precision, but numbers alone cannot measure its cost. What perished in Paris was not only life, but trust. Neighbors turned executioners, priests became generals, and the crown became a god of blood. Even now, centuries later, the stones of Saint-Germain-l'Auxerrois seem to hum with an unease that time cannot erase. Tourists pass beneath its arches, unaware that beneath their feet lies the epicenter of one of humanity's most orchestrated atrocities. The city that once celebrated divine grace still carries, in its silence, the resonance of that bell. If history teaches anything, it is that violence born of fear will always return, refined, disguised, rationalized. The Night of Knives was not a singular horror. It was a rehearsal for the machinery of modern massacre, for every regime that ever justified murder as necessity. And so, the story of St. Bartholomew's Day does not end in 1572. It endures wherever power cloaks itself in faith, wherever rulers trade mercy for control, and wherever the machinery of death hums quietly behind the curtains of civilization. In the end, perhaps the most haunting echo is not the tolling of the bells, but the unfinished line left by a forgotten printer. Le brute à la porte. The sound at the door, a reminder that history knocks again and again, and it is up to us whether we open it to truth or to silence.